Welcome to this episode of the PLM Green Global Alliance, where together with my partner Erik Rieger, who is the moderator for the Design for Sustainability workgroup, I talk with Adrian Segens. Adrian is known as a professional active in the field of sustainability, energy data and regulatory compliance, and currently associated with the Cambridge Design Partnership. We will learn a lot more about Adrian soon, but first I want to hand over to Erik, and please, Erik, I'll let you introduce the session.
Okay, many thanks, Jos, for handing over. And also from my side, Adrian, very much welcome to our discussion today about design for sustainability. And in fact, when we talked the first time, you impressed me by the fact that you are obviously an early adopter of sustainability. So by these days, sustainability seems to be a nice word and buzzword. You have been impressed me very much by your history and when you started early about thinking about sustainability. So that's why can you tell me a bit more about your passion, which brought you, and what is the background of your passion for sustainability?
Absolutely. I mean, professionally, it's probably saying that, unusually, particularly for this audience, my work with technology has been a long one, but I've moved from the digital sort of into the physical in more recent years. So for the last 10 years or more, most of my work has been related purely to sustainability, and particularly sort of using technologies to get insights into where environmental impact happens within business processes and manufacturing and products. And a lot of my work has been about using LCA, life cycle assessment, but turning that into a business tool rather than something that is, as it has been historically, sort of something that's rather academic. And I've moved from that digital environment in recent times into Cambridge Design Partnership, the company that I currently work for, which is great for me, because the frustration always was that I could analyze the data sort of down to a very fine degree and find where hotspots were, but then the client conversation was always, how do we turn this sort of into a product? But for me, passionately, where the passion comes from is that I've been passionate about the environment for as long as I remember. I was in my teens, sort of a young Greenpeace activist, and I'm still very much a supporter. And but these days, my focus really is more about execution rather than protest. It's about sort of how we address environmental impact. The saving the planet idea is one that I find useful, because the planet will get on very well without us. And the link from that into product design, a great hero of mine is the great Dieter Rams, who of course just turned 94 within the last couple of weeks. And in a speech in 1976, he said, his quote was that thoughtless design only can exist in a time of thoughtless consumption for thoughtless production, and we can't afford thoughtlessness. And 50 years later, maybe we're starting to hear his warning.
Maybe sub question, Adrian. You talk about sustainability, which is a very broad topic. In the Alliance, we also talk about climate change, material choice, saving the planet. Are there any areas where you really focus, or are you also fully in the full width of sustainability active?
Well, what sustainability means to me is firstly the recognition of what it is. Sustainability, as opposed to conservation with my Greenpeace comrades, it's sustainability. What we're trying to sustain is a working and livable economy and society on a planet that will soon have 8 billion people on it. And that's the problem. It's an economic one. And for me, that's why the circular economy is so important, because so much of that resource use, so much of climate change emissions are derived directly from the way that we make, consume and end the life of products. It really has to begin with products. So my real focus at the moment is the transition to the circular economy, and what that means is a transition in very real terms for companies, because there are so many opportunities.
I'm very glad to hear this, to be honest, because I mean, from my perspective, of course, as a human being, I can take care about sustainability in general. But from my perspective as an engineer, I think there's our biggest impact. And that's, from my understanding, increasing circular economy, but also sustainable impact just from the design, the early stages. So that's basically where we can create the latest impact. That's why I'm so much passionate for design.
Absolutely, and the same here, because if you look at the sustainability reports of companies and their GHG Scope 3 reporting. There are 15 categories, as you know, in Scope 3, and the only two that ever really matter for any product company are purchased goods and services, which is materials, and the use phase. So the end of life phase impacts upon that as well, but everything else matters. So the only levers we have to reduce those are products.
Yeah, perfectly agree. But let's step back and then can you give us some more background about Cambridge Design Partnership and what is the mission of focus of this company?
Absolutely. Cambridge Design Partnership, I'm currently sitting in our head office, which, as the name suggests, is in Cambridge in the UK. I'm sitting at the moment in what is our innovation centre, where nearly 200, and along with me, are working in this building. We were founded nearly 30 years ago. We're an entirely employee-owned organization, which means that all of us here bring that passion to it. And we are an innovation partner for large brands. We describe ourselves as that rather than sort of a product design consultancy, because the breadth of our capability is so much wider. And here we have facilities where I'm surrounded by laboratories of various kinds, as well as a pilot production facility, which I can see right in front of me, where we mirror and build pilot production lines from scratch to take product innovation right the way through. But where we really specialize is because of the quality of the applied scientific work that we do here, the detailed engineering, is that what we're doing, particularly in sustainability at the moment, is taking our clients through the real barriers. So I had conversations this morning that were all about particular challenges of packaging materials, for example. So packaging materials, sustainable packaging is not just about a material swap, but those materials themselves are a challenge because they behave in a different way from everything else that has gone before. So is the challenge the properties of that material, whether it still has the same protective and barrier properties, for example, and very importantly, hence our production facility, will it run on the production lines that companies have set up for it? So these are the practical issues around that transition. It's when corporate intent, setting an SBTI target, saying that you want to be net zero by 2045 or 50, saying that you want a circular model. This is the exciting part. This is where that transition really starts to happen.
Maybe an interesting thought about packaging. It has been one of I think the first points where companies addressed their sustainability, because that's also how they expose themselves to the outside market. In a way, it looks very simple, but it's very complex. I understood that to have the right packaging for the right goods, etc. I mean, do you see a development in that? Are we making big progress in packaging?
We are. It's remarkable, and it isn't just simply a matter of a material swap or including the recycled content. I mean, for all the examples that I just talked about how you deal with that difference and make it scale. But in a conversation that I was having sort of just earlier today, we use here a methodology called sustainability clean sheeting, which I developed, which is a variation on clean sheeting, which anyone in design for manufacture will be familiar with. It's about that cost of implementation versus benefit, and we use life cycle assessment, and we put that in combination with should cost projections on all the concepts we develop, and we can see sort of very clearly from that. I'll share a graphic afterwards. We can see very clearly on that where the differences come from in terms of cost benefit. And this is important to get over that myth, and it is a myth, that sustainable products are more costly products, where the cost benefit comes from in relation to the environmental benefit. So a graph that I shared with a client of ours earlier was looking at the redesign in packaging of a PET 500 milliliter bottle. And one of the options for a new design was to move to 30% recycled material, which did make a difference. But simply changing the package geometry, getting rid of the sleeve wrap that goes on the bottle, and making the closure just a few millimeters shorter, had enormous environmental benefit, and the recycled content was just the.
Yeah.
So it is about sort of how you see the whole thing. So when we look at sustainable packaging design, there are 13 design levers that I look at, and recycled content and material swap are only 2 of those. The others can often be more significant.
Well, which is interesting. But then, I mean, just looking back at my own career, I was educated very much in product focused design, so no one took care about packaging all stuff. So, which I understand and has big impact on design culture for the future. And people need to understand it's not just making screws and everything put together the product, but it's having a comprehensive view on the product. So that's why my next question is about, if you look at your business, where do you see companies acting and what drives them? So is it something they recognize already today, or is something which is still a nice vision? So.
No, absolutely. For many years when I started working in sustainability, sustainability teams in companies were very much an extension of the marketing department, and it was sort of almost a PR exercise. But what we're now seeing, not quickly enough, but we are seeing it being driven down into real decision making at companies, and that is the challenge. So there's a very telling study from EY, Ernst & Young, in 2023, where they looked at the top 100 UK companies, the FTSE 100. They found that 85 of those companies, a lot of which were product companies, had set net zero targets and had them SBTi verified. 85% done that. 5 of them then had a credible publicly shared plan about how they were actually going to execute that. And this is what we see. So often when we get a design brief from a big company, the big company has this sustainability objective. Our website that says very clearly, we will be net zero by 2045. They're ambitious. But then when we get a design brief from a client, it's often completely missing from that design brief. And yet, how are you going to get to that without you really changing your products? Particularly as a lot of the work that we do is in your pharmaceutical and medical equipment and highly regulated environments, where there are realistically only going to be sort of 2 or 3 product generations between now and 2050. So you have to make significant advances on every generation, which means often we have to challenge the client's thinking. And for circularity, rethinking is the first. Well, it's not the first step. If you look at the ladder of 10, it's the second. But rethinking the way we approach things is exactly that. If you actually do have a show and tell example here, this is a concept that we developed here at Cambridge Design Partnership, and it's not been commercialized. So we developed this as an exercise in rethinking and what circularity means. So a lot of our work, in fact, most of our work, is in drug delivery and medtech. So we work with a lot of the big pharmaceutical companies, and of course, as you're going to be aware, particularly with GLP-1 growth and so on, as well as a general trend, it's very important now that patients treat themselves at home. Home treatment and self-administration is a big change in medicine. So what that means is the world is now full of billions of these auto-injectors for patients to self-inject at home. And not only does that, in terms of a device, and there being billions of them, create its own environmental pressure, the fact is that the real challenge is, of course, is that how do you support a patient at home to administer their own therapy properly so that they have the benefit as well as anything else? But from a sustainability point of view, the drug therapy, which is contained in that small vial there, is often has a larger footprint than the device that surrounds it. So when product teams look at this kind of product, their initial focus is thinking about the materials. And of course, those are important. But the material impact of this device here is probably about 20%. The rest of it, and the biggest part of it potentially, comes from how you prevent that drug product being wasted. So the way we approached it was to think in terms of product as a service and what circularity actually means, to rethink the product. So instead of focusing on the material device, this was a concept that we came up with. This is product as a service, but with this drug delivery in mind. So this is a durable auto-injector pen. It fits into this part here. We've automated the way that it is then filled and refilled. Very importantly, it has very good user interaction. And it is refrigerated. So one of the issues of drug waste is that people store it in refrigerators at home, and it's lost that way. So we control its environment, we control its application here, we prompt the user when to take the drug, and we also remind them when they need to order some more. And as a delivery method, this is now drug delivery as a service, because the sharps contaminants are contained here, and that's returned. And at the end of the treatment, this whole unit is returned via a process where we triage it, we find ways of refurbishing it, and it goes back into the field in a very quick and efficient process. So the whole business model changes, the whole efficacy of the drug treatment changes, and the environmental impact of this device with that using very controlled consumables, which are then controlled, is an entirely different environmental picture. So this is rethinking auto injectors, and for me, it's a great example of circular design and product as a service.
Exactly. I think it's a very great example, because product as a service is something that, particularly in the circular economy, is crucial to make the manufacturer owning all the material flow and the reuse or the refurbishment. And many times there is the misunderstanding that recycling is the most important thing.
Absolutely. This is why I find that sort of 10 stages ladder, which I'm sure you're familiar with, very, very powerful. And whenever I've seen many circular economy presentations where someone will put that slide up, and I always put that slide up as well. And it's always important, because I look around the audience and there are always people who think circular economy is about recycling. But then when you look at the ladder of what the preference is, and you realize that recycling is number 8, there are 7 things you could be doing before then. That's when the message of circularity really gets across.
In fact, that was one of the surprises for me, that recycling is the second worst case after disposing for sustainability, where reuse is the most preferred way. But that's why I learned that awareness of people about what it does mean for the sustainability and economic impact is still at its beginning. So that's why a lot of clarification work is required to think about this. And which brings me to the next question. So basically, for you working with the customers, can you share some experience benefits that has been observed? And I don't want to start with my experiences, but I'm very much interested in your experience observation summary first of all, and then let's discuss it.
I think there are a number of things driving the market at the moment, and clients see benefit against that. A lot of the work we do at the moment is in reaction to regulatory drivers. So in packaging, for example, PPWR, the packaging and packaging waste regulation in the EU, is a big focus for people, which is coming into effect in August and affects every company that has a packaged product is one. But PPWR in Europe is actually only one of 61 regulatory environments globally. Even in the US, individual states are going their own way. So 7 US states, regardless of what happens in Washington, are going down very important environmental routes. And there are EPR schemes on every continent except Antarctica, which is where you would hope never to see some packaging. But that is one driver. And the other is ESPR, the Eco Design for Sustainable Products Regulation with right to repair and so on. The legislature that is pushing the circular economy. The important thing for us is to work with our clients so that they are not seeing that as purely compliance, that they know they have to comply. So the real question is, if you have to comply and you're going to invest in redesign of products, then make that work. So if you have to embrace circularity because you have to design products for repair, reuse, and so on, then think about the business transition that goes with that. If you have to use a DPP, like we built into this, it's not just a question of putting on a QR code for regulation. It's about how you use that to really transform the business model. Think about what that means for the return process in this case, and how it enables customer interactions, how it enables service, and so on. So we're finding sort of customers where we're building business cases out of sustainability. That's really what's driving it, and that's what will drive it even further.
I think in discussions also related to the DPP, how we see so many companies now realizing that it's there is a regulation, but there are so much benefits by implementing it. Huh?
Absolutely, absolutely, and particularly for the PLM community and the design community. If you ask a client the question, what does it mean if you can identify every product you've ever made and stay in touch with it in the field, it really opens up sort of entirely new areas of customer value and manufacturing and everything. For us as designers and the PLM community as well, the data created, of course, and how you then creatively use that. So for me, one of the really exciting things about DPP is all that metadata that's going to be coming back sort of from consumer interactions with that. So design has always been a process where what doesn't work sort of and needs to be redesigned is often sort of anecdotal, or it's based on service records and so on. It's always been sort of subjective to a large degree. But once we have all of that data coming back from people who are interacting with their products, and we can see what they don't understand as users, what they're doing wrong, which components fail, what are the most common service requests, that coming into a design consultancy means that we can transform things.
It's the ultimate dream of modern PLM, to have the end-to-end visibility.
End-to-end visibility, exactly.
Which means on the other hand that modern PLM is an enabler of sustainability for the future. So digital thread basically, but also having feedback loops for the product and so on. That's really a requirement for enabling sustainability as a culture of products. So basically.
Absolutely. And human factors, the way that people interact with products, either a product as sophisticated as this or a product as, seemingly basic as a plastic drinks bottle, understanding sort of understanding how we make sustainable behavior the easiest behavior and how you facilitate that through design is the things that we're focused on here.
How do you see the industry impact? So my example right now, I'm working with a child car seat manufacturer, and sustainability is a big issue for them because the end consumer product, and of course, is driving the success of the product. But on the other hand, going back to manufacturing, traditional machinery and so on, sustainability is, just done for regulations, compliance, but not really. And I'm still thinking about how can we motivate these companies better to think about or establish sustainability as part of the culture for them.
Well, that really is an interesting observation, because actually for what I've seen, particularly in recent years, it's often the other way around. You're right, sort of consumer goods companies are reacting to consumers and they're reacting to regulation. But where I'm seeing real progress on circularity is actually sort of in the industrial sectors rather than anywhere else. And I think that they have two big advantages. Firstly the ownership model. Very often capital equipment is already sort of on a lease basis, and it's very sort of servitized, and that's where the value is created. So they're already one step there. And the other part, of course, is that you're talking about sort of high value components, and there is a big incentive on bringing those back. For me, the poster child, the company that I've learned so much about sustainable design from and have made such incredible progress are Philips. And of course, 27% of their revenue, largely on their high spec, high-tech medical equipment like MRI scanners, is driving 27% of their revenue at the moment. So that they've really proved that. And it's the rest of the medtech sector who we work with very closely are very much influenced by what's happening there. So I think the driver will be that the realization that it makes economic sense. It really isn't an economic driver. It is about resource consumption and better ways of doing it.
And I understood that you have been active in supply chains, and there you see also the challenging of global supply chains. It's better to source your materials and keep them under your own control. Huh?
Absolutely. Yeah, particularly, often when Trump came to power again, and I had the same question the first time, it didn't make any difference. But people were saying to me, particularly here, because our focus client is largely the US. We get probably 70% of our revenues coming into here from the US, and people were asking me whether I was concerned, and I wasn't, because the states are individually sort of acting on their own. Hopefully these things will pass. And of course, Trump's policies in the Middle East and around tariffs and so on have probably done more for the circular economy in America than anything else, because so many brands are realizing they really must sort of improve the resilience of their supply chain, and that means not relying on imports, about sort of making it local and increasing the skills there.
And exactly, and the same for the energy transition now. Huh?
Exactly, exactly.
Excellent. Many thanks. Very much inspiring for me. So then, of course, the question is what's next? So where's the trend going? And of course, these days in particular, we always need to talk about AI. So what is the AI impact, or how much can we leverage AI for increasing sustainability?
Yeah, it's a fascinating issue. It really is. And as I say, I came from the digital world into the physical world, so I'm very much aware of what happens there. And as a technology, AI has just so much potential, and I can think of 100 ways in which it's going to affect sustainability and sustainable design. As I mentioned earlier, all of that metadata coming from DPPs, will need sort of AI to process that, and the insights that will come from it will be transformational, and so many other ways. In huge data sets. So one of the projects that we've been working on here, was AI enabled, and it was as simple as someone opening a package, and we used AI to analyze video footage. And I never realized there were 15 ways of opening a single packaging format. I picked them up and I opened it one way. 14 other people will answer it a different way. So it's those kind of insights that sort of are really coming from AI. The challenge, of course, is that we use AI in those applications and so many more to cancel out the digital footprint which AI is creating. So, again, the physical world and PLM, really has to apply to the way that the data centers work, what their energy consumption is, what their water consumption is, which is phenomenal. And we need to get that balance, and it's worth doing.
Coming back to the AI, the power consumption, I think, is huge and tremendous, especially for images. I think I understood that textual queries are relatively cheap in that case. So, but also the high need for the data centers also pushed the energy transition in those countries. I mean, a nuclear reactor takes 10, 20, 30 years to build if you want to have clean energy. So in a way, AI might be a fear, but it's also a driver again for better energy transition.
Absolutely. The water footprint is one of the things that is really quite shocking about AI. I mean, one of the biggest areas for growth in data centers in Europe is Spain, which also is one of the most water threatened countries in Europe. So those two things have to be balanced, and it's possible.
Yeah, just coming back from Spain from the Share PLM summit. I mean, it was also an area with 300 days of sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
Just a question about also we talk about sustainability, but also the economy has to change. Have you heard about the recent report from Piketty and friends also about his future, saying we can change our economic model, we should work less and consume less, of course. And in that context, also Kate Raworth probably is also very famous for the donut economy. Do you see anything in companies on the economical side that they are considering this better?
The change in the business model, really is sort of a very exciting thing. And I think one of the things that's transformational for product companies is the realization that the investor and the financial community love the circular economy, and they're its biggest sort of advocates. And the reason being, the investor community has driven a lot of sustainability in recent years, particularly sort of since BlackRock sort of disinvested from fossil fuels. But the other big transition is that if you are in the linear economy and you're a manufacturer in the linear economy, then you as a company are only as good as your last quarter sales figures, because the model is, of course, as we know, you have to sell a new product in order to recover the cost of what you've produced and then make a profit on that. That's the way everything's worked since the Industrial Revolution. What the circular economy does is bring that as a service model. And of course, what that means is that if you're an investor, as well as if you're in that company, the revenue model is changed. I'm from a software as a service background, so we learned this years ago. No one buys discs anymore. What you have is, that regular, predictable income in terms of revenue. You're not recovering the cost of your product at the point of sale, but you are going to recover it and a lot more sort of over the lifetime of a product, because that's the way the model works. If you have a happy customer with a long living product, they will continue to pay. They'll be getting value, and of course you'll be getting value sort of way beyond the cost of production. So it's that change in the business model that has really caught the attention of the investor community and is changing minds. Philips, of course, again really pioneered that.
But also we as consumers have to learn to live with that. I remember the World Economic Forum lecture from Ida Auken, who talked, in the future you will own nothing. It caused for conspiracy thinkers immediately a reason to think that there's a new elite coming, owning everything and making us happy slaves. I mean, but it was a very bright message, exactly for sustainability of the planet. And
and of course, we forget this is relatively recent. I was, talking to someone about sort of an as-a-service business model recently, and my grandparents, my parents, myself as a young man, never owned a washing machine or a television, because in those days and up until the 90s, consumer goods were much more expensive, much less reliable. And so we rented them. So this is a business model that is coming back and can be, because of technology, because it doesn't rely on bricks and mortar, that can be applied so more effectively. So I think it's a habit that we need to relearn.
Exactly, yeah. Connected products allow you to have better control of product as a service. You don't have to wait till somebody calls.
The irony for me personally about joining Cambridge Design Partnership is that we're actually sort of quite a long way outside of the city centre of Cambridge, and I actually live in London, so I'm not here every day. I'm sort of here 2 or 3 days a week. The irony for me was, having not owned a car, being a Londoner and not needing a car, I hadn't owned a car for about 5 years, and joining this company meant that I had to buy a car for the first time in many years. But I had been driving all that time, but I was using Zipcar in London as a service. I was a driver, but I used a car as and when I needed it. I didn't have to own.
Yeah, London has a great infrastructure, but if you have to move between cities, there is no train infrastructure like we have in the Netherlands.
Nowhere near as good, I'm afraid. No.
Yeah, I mean, at some time might be 2 generations will be fully adopted, honestly. So just think about software industry, which had the transformation over the last decade. So there's no perpetual, you don't buy those software anymore, you only subscribe to software. I look at my own person, I don't own a car because I'm coming from Berlin, I go to the next street, take a car, share a car. So but I also realize it's really something over generations coming back, moving away from it's my own property to something I'm renting. And I'm very much happy about this view and basically how it impacts our product design.
It does, and of course the design of cars will have to change. There's one of the most wonderful things that the Circular Car Initiative from the World Economic Forum, regardless of whether people are in the automotive industry, and I have spent time working with car companies on this, but we talk about sort of sustainability in the circular economy, but there aren't many visions of what it actually looks like. And the WF Circular Car Initiative envisages a world with 60% more passenger kilometers, with 400 million fewer cars in the world. And that's a vision. They worked out how it's possible.
What's the only thing why it took so long? This product as a service concept is available or launched since Power by the Hour from Rolls-Royce about 50 years ago. So why does it take so long to have this concept adopted and being more used?
Well, absolutely. As I said earlier, Dieter Rams in 1976 warned us that what was happening. Yeah.
But in one way, we see also the job security. I mean, the European car companies just pushing for keep on working the same way because we don't want to lose those jobs.
Well, nothing has changed in the business model in automotive since Henry Ford. If he was alive today, he'd recognize it exactly. But it is changing. It is changing because the revenue model for the automotive OEMs would now be entirely different. Which is why you're seeing them getting involved in refurbishing, why you're seeing them very active in the used and refurbished car market, which were areas of the value chain which on the Henry Ford model they were never part of. But that is how you maintain the company and the numbers.
And the battle for the batteries. I mean,
absolutely.
Good. I think we are reaching the half hour, Adrian. I think it was a very interesting and very positive session. Is
I've
there
enjoyed
anything that you would say to our audience? What should they take away from this session?
I think really from the message for a PLM audience is that the focus there, as we just talked about earlier, was on product data, and product data is so important because we can't build any of these circular products, and we can't build the business models without that. So that really is the key insight for the PLM community, and that's where design and circularity and PLM meet. It's all about the insight. It's all about the quality of the evidence and the data that goes in, and that can't be emphasized. And the analysis, the thinking behind it. So all of what we've been talking about the benefit of circularity and what really makes a product sustainable, it really has to come from that whole life cycle perspective. So it's product life cycle and life cycle thinking. LCA, PLM, these are the key perspectives. Otherwise, you can't see.
Yeah. And with my PLM twisted mind, I hear digitalization behind it. I mean, you need data and not documents. Huh?
Nothing can scale. The circular economy won't work without digitalization. And, the DPP and all of the insights that come from it. And, I can't imagine a circular business model that isn't very technology reliant.
Fully agree. Okay, thank you very much, Adrian. Erik, thank you, and success also with the design of sustainability work.